David Foster Wallace knew almost 30 years ago that the purpose of a writer isn't to release some trash sci-fi or fantasy or to write what's in your heart or get this idea that's in your head down on paper and show your family and friends in the world. But rather, your job as a writer is to write transformative works that can change the world. And we are going to hear Wallace speak at length on this today. And this aligns with this channel's vision of the literary renaissance, which is an educational and spiritual awakening manifested by books. It is the transcending of all the logic bros and all the stifled Reddit projectors who are ruining art and not elevating themselves and audiences, because they no longer believe that that is possible. And so, my name is Ian, and here on Writeconscious, we talk about David Foster Wallace. In the playlist down below, you will find over 80 videos on Wallace's books, his life, and his writing philosophy, with more videos being dropped every single week. But enough for me. Let us now hear from Wallace. Except, of course, the hard thing is to do both at the same time, because a book has to teach a reader how to read it. So the structure stuff starts right at the beginning. We sit around and bitch about how TV has ruined the audience for reading, when really all it's done is given us the really precious gift of making our job harder. You know what I mean? And it seems to me like the harder it is to make a reader feel like it's worthwhile to read your stuff, the better a chance you've got of making real art, because it's only real art that does that. You teach the reader that he's way smarter than he thought he was. I think one of the insidious lessons about TV is the meta lesson that you are dumb. This is all you can do. This is easy. And you are the sort of person who really just wants to sit in a chair and have it easy. When in fact, there are parts of us, in a way, that are a lot more ambitious than that. And what we need, I think, and I'm not saying I'm the person to do it, but I think what we need is seriously engaged art that can teach, again, that we are smart. And that there's stuff that TV and movies, although they are great at certain things, cannot give us. That we have to create the motivations for us to want to do the extra work, to get these other kinds of art. And I think you can see that it in the visual arts. I think you can see it in music. But Wallace is dropping some fire here because he understands the concept of having to make people care about your transformative and difficult work, because there are plenty of authors out there who write these very complex and hard works. But the structure at the beginning gives me no inclination of why I should care. The packaging of the product, the title, the book cover, their online marketing give me no reason to want to read and care about the book. When you look at the marketing campaign, the cover, the editing, and the first chapter of Infinite Jest, it is meant to help you push through the rest of the novel and try to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And Wallace, throughout the entire book, is teaching you how to read. He is forcing you to go through this long marathon, or I should say ultra marathon, where at times you are having to walk and read his weird Ebonic dialects. And at other times, you can breeze through sections, with Oren and Joel. And the same in his short essays, He could be talking about something and put an interpolation where he rants about Wittgensteinian private language for a couple paragraphs. But by that point, he has drawn you in, so you're going to read the Wittgensteinian rant. And this is something that so many authors miss today, that there needs to be an amount of foreplay to excite the reader and make them want to continue. And once again, it starts with their first impression of you. We all have this little fantasy that the reader enters the arena with a clear and objective mind with no expectations, which is wrong. And then many people say, because they have a resentful attitude, well, if people can't figure it out, then that's their fault. It's not my job to do that. And maybe they're not that blunt about it, but I've read countless amateur works that don't have the transition sentences, don't have some of the world building and basic characterization necessary, because I think they think that they are being avant-garde, and beyond that, necessary for me to care. And so I put it down and will never trust that author again. And I love Wallace's positive attitude when he says that it's fun to sit and bitch about TV and TikTok and all of these things, but what it's done is given us the precious gift of being the Wakeup Artist of 2024. If you are a good novelist or you are a good writer and you actually put in the work to get your work out there, you are going to be a revered and sacred individual in this society that doesn't care. And Wallace says that the harder it is to transform them, the better the payoff, the bigger the risk, the better chance you have of making real art, because your art is supposed to be transformative. There have been a million novels that are great, that are above average about every single niche genre, including, in sci-fi, fantasy, even literary fiction. And we don't need any more. And if you just want to put your work out there and just puke all over the table to show us that you can do it, then great. But as I always say, David Foster Wallace transformed himself. Yes, he was talented, but he did overcome his addiction. He did overcome, at least from what I could tell, some of his abusive tendencies while writing Infinite Jest. That was hard. He had been an addict since a teenager. He had probably been an abusive, narcissistic womanizer his entire life. He had been a logic bro his entire life. And by getting over all of that, he was then able to direct his focus to a world that was getting into MTV and TV very deeply for the first time and be successful. And so if your writing and your art isn't hitting with people, then you most likely have to admit that it's your fault and you're not stepping up to the task necessary, because we have Infinite Jest. We have now access with shadow libraries to tens of millions of books. You have access online to people who can help you with your stuff for free. You can make so many connections. So we should be writing better than David Foster Wallace. It should be easier than ever. And it is coinciding with the amount of brain rot out there. And so the task shouldn't be more difficult than ever. But because we are hanging on to our mentality that says that we need to act like we are in the golden age of literature and not connect with audiences and not learn to package our stuff and market ourselves and our work, then we aren't stepping into the opportunity that we have in 2024. Wallace did. He went around and did Rolling Stone interviews. He did countless radio interviews. He wrote nonfiction pieces, which are the ultimate advertisement, especially back when magazines were something that people read. But now with social media, you have an ability to reach more people than David Foster Wallace ever did with the help of publishing houses and radio and all that stuff. And this is important because you teach the reader that he's way smarter than he thought he was. That is what a wake-up artist does. That is what a transformer and a visionary does for a society. And we're so lost that you can't come across as smart. You can't even say that you are smart anymore, you guys. That's how far we have fallen. If you say that you are smart or intelligent, then people will say that you have a superiority complex. You will end up on the I am very smart Reddit page. We have given the weak, the non-doers, the non-artists, the cynic that is in every single classroom and at every single workplace, an opportunity to come together and influence public perception. And our job as an artist is not to cater to those individuals because they are always going to hate you, but rather to elevate and touch the people that you can with engaged art, because being a logic bro online is easy. It's easy to watch any video and leave a negative comment. It's easy to read a book and say that Haruki Murakami is misogynist or David Foster Wallace is mid. And so our impossible task, our big task, is to wake the people up who haven't totally drinking the Kool-Aid yet. Because there are so many Manchurian candidates out there who do occupy Reddit, who are mini logic bros. I was once one of them, but all I needed was someone to make me believe in myself. And David Foster Wallace was that person. When I was 18 years old, I had suffered multiple concussions, during my first year of university, doing longboarding and skiing. And I was barely able to read. And after, a little bit of recovering, my dad bought me Infinite Jest. He's like, oh, I read this back in the 90s. I think you would love this. Shout out to my dad. And I think I had turned 19. So during that entire summer, I sat and read it. But that was the first time I had felt in probably 5 or 6 months that I was intelligent. And more so than that, it was the hardest book that I had ever read. And it changed my life. It made me reflect on all the bad choices and I was making and my family trauma and everything else that was happening in my life. And it made me feel intelligent. It made me feel that I was better than the situation I was in. It made me feel like it was better. That I was better. Yeah, and it's so hard for people to hear this, that I was better than all the people in my community college classes who just wanted to get a job, pay taxes, and go to sleep and be a net negative. It eventually inspired me to be talking to you right now. We've built this idea and this persona that the celebrity or the individual needs to be an everyman, that like, hey, Bob, how you doing? Yeah, man, I'm just a normal guy. And that's who we glorify on YouTube. That's why guys like Wendy Goon and so many others are successful, because they are everymen. They are not real artists, because the job of a real artist, of a writer, is to not get caught up in political polarizations, but to rather speak their emotions with no attachment to any end result, which is harder than ever because politics is a virus that has overtaken people's minds. Entertainment, the acquisition of money, religion are things that overtake people's mind. But the artist is someone, even if they are, let's say, religious, who can see through the bullshit like a C.S. Lewis or a Tolkien of the time and be a visionary for the future. And that's why I like David Foster Wallace at some level, because now that I'm older, when I read some of his essays and his short stories, I do cringe sometimes. I read it and he's like calling a lady like this dead-eyed lady. And he kind of talks negatively about people. He talks negatively about David Lynch and like all these other people. But he's not holding back the critical view that all of us have, the critical view that is not politically correct to feel anymore. Because to teach a reader that they are smarter than they already are requires you to assume that the reader is not already intelligent and needs to learn these somewhat simple lessons that you are trying to give them, these early basic transformative lessons that can only be transmuted through art. You know, a lot of the time when you look at Infinite Jest, it's the same lessons we learned in school and in fables. It's just done at a higher level for adults. Books cannot teach the transformative aspects of lived experiences, which are most of the time very unique to your cultural circumstances. But they can teach you the basics, and that's the idea of a literary renaissance, that most individuals are not at a baseline of mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual intelligence. And that if we raise those people to that baseline, that we could live in a almost nonviolent society. And that process can actually happen through books and almost books alone. Obviously, maybe not for like the spiritual stuff, but you can read a lot of it and understand the direction and what you need to do, and then do some implementation, and you can reach that baseline level. But you first have to believe that people need it and get over the idea that everyone's just doing their own thing. Everyone's doing the best that they can. Of course they're fucking not. I'm not. You're not. It's obvious. I've learned a million lessons. I learned lessons in Infinite Jest, you guys, 10 years ago that touched my soul that I still haven't beat yet. And it's been 12 years. And so our job, as Wallace says, is to create the motivations for us to want to do the extra work. And so I believe in you. I believe in this movement. If you guys want to go join my David Foster Wallace course, the link is down in the description below. I also offer a free resource, a free doc that has over 400 of David Foster Wallace's favorite books. If you haven't checked that out, I would recommend it. If you guys want to check out some of my writing, a bunch of it's free over on Substack, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video.